So, you want to learn Unreal Engine 5. Well, you certainly came to the right place. I'm Ethan, and this is Outcast Dev School. In this video, I'm going to cover the basic layout of the Unreal Engine editor, as well as how to install the Epic Games launcher and get your engine installed. We'll be going over how to move around in the viewport, how to move and place objects, different view settings, pretty much everything in the main window of Unreal Engine 5. This video, as you can probably tell, is aimed at complete newcomers to the engine, but if you're just now making the transition from Unreal Engine 4 to Unreal Engine 5, it's probably worth a watch because the whole UI for the editor has been modernized. So without further ado, let's get straight into the video. I've gone ahead and I've pulled up the Epic Games website. The link is down below in the description, and I've specifically pulled up this download page for the Epic Games launcher. Now, if you don't have one, you want to create an Epic Games account on the site, then we can download the launcher by clicking this button right here. Now it will begin to download, but I already have it downloaded and installed on my computer, so I'm going to skip this step. You'd install it like any other program, and I will go ahead and open up the launcher and show you guys what it looks like. It will start you off on its store page, but what we're interested in is this Unreal Engine section here. So I will go ahead and click it, and there are multiple tabs: news, samples, marketplace, library, and Twinmotion. Now today I'm just going to go straight over to the library. But before we can create projects, we have to install the Unreal Engine. So on my screen, you'll see that I have two engine versions installed, the latest version of Unreal Engine 4 and the first version of Unreal Engine 5. You might have something like this, grayed out section here with the Unreal Engine logo, a version number, and an install button. You want to make sure that this version number is 5.0 or whatever the newest version is for you when you're watching this video. For me, it's 5.0 because Unreal Engine released just 2 days ago as of the recording of this video. So you want to click install here, and once you do, it will ask you to give it a path. You can leave it as the default or set a new one depending on where you want your engine install to be located at. But if you have a solid state drive and you have space, I'd recommend installing it there. Now I'm going to click cancel because I already have Unreal Engine 5 installed, and this right here is Unreal Engine 4.26.2 because it's the most recent version that I don't have installed. So I'm going to get rid of that. And once you have it installed, it might take a little while to do so. You can click launch, and I'm going to do that now. So as you can see, the Unreal editor is loading itself up, and here we go. Now I've clicked over to the games tab, and once you've created a project, it will show up here in this recent projects tab. Now there are multiple templates. There's a blank template, a first person, third person, top down, vehicle, handheld augmented reality, and virtual reality. It doesn't really matter what we do here because in this video, I'm just going to cover the complete basics of the layout of the editor, some essential things to know, and we're not going to be looking at any of these templates yet. But I will just go ahead and click third person anyway, and now we have these project defaults settings. There are two big options here, Blueprint and C++. If you haven't heard of Blueprints, they are Unreal Engine's visual scripting system. It's super powerful, super fun, and it's a bit of an easier way to get into game scripting or programming than jumping straight into C++. And I'll be doing a whole series on that in the future. So we are going to leave this on Blueprint, but if you were to click C++, your default scripts, or your default classes, such as your character that come with the templates, will all be C++ classes instead of blueprints. Only that the starting content is also made in C++. And it looks like the heater for the house just turned on over there, and I'll do my best to edit that noise out of the video, but there is not much I can really do about it, so I apologize for that if I'm not able to get it out of the video entirely. There's also a target platform option. The defaults here are desktop and mobile. I'm going to leave that on desktop. There's a quality preset. I'm going to leave that on maximum, and you can change the scalability settings in the engine if you don't have a super good computer. We also have starter content, which I will leave enabled for now, and ray tracing, which I enable on all my projects because my GPU can handle it. And it's fun to play with Lumen. Lumen looks great with ray traced reflections, and Lumen can take advantage of hardware ray tracing with this enabled. And by the way, Lumen is Unreal Engine 5's new global illumination system. So finally, we will give the project a name. I'll just leave it on the default here. I'm probably not going to keep it on the computer for long. And make sure you give it your project location. Unreal Engine will have a default projects folder, but of course you can set your own custom location for it to put the project in, as I have previously. Once that's done, you just hit create. It will create your project and start it up. Okay, the third person template has loaded up, and you might see a preparing shaders or compiling shaders notification in the bottom. And it might have some huge number, like 6,000 and something. It might be going up as the engine discovers more shaders that need compiled, or it might be going down because your computer is fast enough and the engine's already discovered what it needs to discover. But that is simply something that happens when you first install Unreal Engine, and it won't stop you from getting started, but it might slow you down a bit until that finishes. Now you might see a notification here that says project file is out of date. Would you like to update it? Just go ahead and click update, and let's get into it. Now I'm going to cover the user interface from top to bottom for this main window here. So we have this very top bar with your standard settings you might see in any other program, such as file, where you can create a new level, open an asset, save your current level as, save all, choose files to save, import into level, export all. You can create a new project, open another project, zip your project, or open a recent project from this menu. Now under the edit menu, you have your undo, redo, undo history, cut, copy, paste, duplicate, delete. Now you have your settings for your editor preferences, project settings, and a plugins window where you can enable plugins for your project. Next is a window option where we can open up various other windows inside of the engine. Now, we're not going to worry about any of these right now. I'll be covering the most important ones in future videos, along with other things. We have tools, just a set of tools for the engine, class viewer, find in blueprints, debug, settings for source control, Unreal Insights, convert level for converting non-world partition levels to world partition, which is a system for handling open worlds. There's a lot of stuff here. Unreal Engine is a really powerful engine, but for this video, I'm just trying to cover broad scope the user interface of the engine. Now we have build, where we can build lighting if we're using static lighting, reflection captures, again, if we're using static lighting, hierarchical levels of detail, minimap. Again, lots of stuff here that I'll be covering in future videos, so don't worry if you don't know what all of this stuff is yet. A select menu, an actor menu, and a help menu where you can easily access the Unreal Engine documentation, which is something I definitely recommend giving a read. So pretty standard stuff here. Now, right underneath it are going to be all of your tabs for the engine. So for example, if let's see, open up this cube asset here, and I'll go through that process and how I did that later in this video. It will either create a new window with a new tab, which you can drag and drop into here, or it'll just add a tab onto this third person map. So I will close out of that. And underneath the tabs section, we have the top bar of our viewport, a quick save icon to save the level or what we have selected. And we have the different editor modes that we can choose from, such as select, landscape, foliage, mesh paint, modeling, fracture, brush editing, and animation. Again, I'm not going to be covering all of these in detail in this video. We're just going to be covering the user interface. Next, we have a create button or drop down menu where we can add some of the common things that you'll be using all the time into your level. Now, keep in mind, these are not custom assets or 3D models that you'd import into the engine. These are basic shapes like cubes, visual effects such as a post-process volume or an atmosphere, different types of light such as a directional light, which would be a sunlight, or a point light like a light bulb, spotlight, a rectangle light, which is like a big sort of softer diffused light, and a skylight, which is just essentially light scattered through the sky. It bounces off the ground back up into the sky. It's like the ambient lighting for your environment. And one of the most important things here is Quixel Bridge. So let's click that and open it up. Now, months and months ago, Epic Games acquired a company called Quixel Megascans, and they've made it free to use with Unreal Engine. You can actually click over here and sign in with your Epic Games account. You're gonna enter your email address, password, and log in. I haven't signed into Quixel Bridge yet since I've installed Unreal Engine 5, but we can go ahead and click through here and see a bit of what they have to offer. And there's some crazy, awesome stuff here. A ton of photorealistic 3D models and textures. And an awesome thing about Quixel Bridge is that you can just drag and drop any of these 3D models straight into the engine, and they'll work with Nanite, with Lumen, the big new technologies in Unreal Engine 5. So I will go ahead and log in, and then we'll drag some stuff in and see what happens. All right, so I've logged into Quixel Bridge with my Epic Games account. Now, I can just click and drag this tab, and I can dock it in the editor. I'll put it here. Actually, I'll put it over here. Bit easier to see what all is here. Now I'm just going to scroll, and I'm going to grab this modular wooden window here. And what I can do, you have this download button. What I can do is I can just ensure that the quality here is on Nanite, close out, and I can drag and drop this asset straight into the Unreal Engine editor. It's just as simple as that. Now it's going to begin downloading the asset, and while it does so, we get a low resolution version, and gosh, that looks fantastic already. And so what I did there, you saw me move my camera from all the way up here to over here, is that I held down the right mouse button and moved my mouse, which allows me to look around, and then I used the W, A, S, and D keys, which are the keys you use to fly around inside of the level editor viewport. You can also use the Q and E keys to raise yourself up and down. Now I'm going to let this download, and while it does, I'm going to continue going over the user interface of the Unreal Engine editor. So, past this create button, we have this blueprint tab, which is just a list of world blueprints available to the user for editing or creation. So we can create a new blueprint class from here. We can convert a selection to a blueprint class. So let's say we want to add some functionality to this cube. We can select it, click convert selection to blueprint class, choose our class, give it a name, and create it. And this stuff is probably all seems super complicated, and I know I'm going a bit fast because, again, overview, as soon as the first video in the blueprint series is up, you'll either be watching this video from a blueprint tutorial series playlist, or you'll be able to click on the little link that shows up above the video somewhere in either of these corners, not sure which. So we'll close out of that, and now we have this Next, drop down menu, which is the sequencer menu. We can add a level sequence or add a master sequence. And the sequencer is something you'd use for cutscenes or cinematics in the engine. There's plenty of great videos out there on the internet for it. It's not something that I'm planning on covering too soon on the channel, but maybe someday I'll eventually get around to doing it. Now, next we have this play button here, which if we click, we spawn into this world, and we can, in the third person's input, we have this character. We can move around, jump around. Now, you might be seeing a little bit of stuttering here. It's just because it's preparing my mesh for nanite, and I'm trying to record at the same time, so I'm using up lots of CPU and GPU power right now. OBS, which is what I use to record my videos, isn't too great with performance with the CPU, so I might look into recording my videos with something else in the future. Now, it looks like our mesh, our high resolution version, has loaded in. But before we take a closer look at that, let's look at some of the options we have for playing. We have a selected viewport option, a mobile preview, a new editor window, which will just create a new game window, a standalone game, which will launch your game code as a new running application in Windows. And we can also choose our starting location. We can choose our current camera location so that we don't start at the game's starting point, which is this little object right here, which you can access through this create menu. Let's see, basic player start. You can click, drag one out into the level just like that. I'm going to delete it, and I'll move my camera over here again by holding down the right mouse button and using the WASD, Q, and E keys. I'll hit play, and I'll fall down from the sky. So that's a super useful option if you just want to test a portion of your level and you don't want to go through the entire thing before you get to the place you want to test. Now, there's a couple of things you can do here. Maybe you're playing, but you want to look at something that's happening, but you can't get through but you can't get there. It's through a wall or in another room. What you can do is you can press the F8 key on your keyboard, and that will eject you from the player character. We have our cursor now. We can right click and hold to move our camera, and we can use the WASD, Q, and E keys again to move around through the viewport. We can select objects, but moving them I do not think works. And once you're ready to go back into your character, you can just right click on it, and we can click the pilot button here. And whoa, Unreal Engine completely glitched out. And that's just an example that despite Unreal Engine 5 being released, it's in an early stage, and it looks like there's still some or a couple of interesting bugs. So I'm not sure about you guys, but I think I may have just found the thumbnail for the video. So after the play options here, we have the platforms options where we have platform settings where we can package our project for different patterns, which is how you take your project and you turn it into an executable video game file that doesn't just exist within the Unreal Engine editor. And that's finally it for this bar, except for a little button here titled Settings, where we can access world settings, project settings, and plugins. One of the things you might find yourself using more often than lots of others, maybe barring the project settings, is this engine scalability settings section. Here you can change the resolution scale of the image of the engine. And it actually has some pretty good upscaling going on, it looks like, or maybe it's just not kicking in for me right now. And you can change your quality preset. I can change it to cinematic, epic, down to high, medium, which disables lumen, and low, which disables shadows, I think, altogether. You can hit auto, and it'll detect what's best for your computer. I'm gonna leave that on epic. I mean, that's what it chooses automatically anyway, or you know what? I'll put it on cinematic because why not? Okay, so finally we've gotten through a lot of the boring stuff. And we have a drop down here. We can show our FPS right here on the screen. Again, I'm recording and I'm getting a little bit of stuttering here. And it's actually, if you are getting a constant stuttering in the engine and you have no idea what could be causing it, it might have to do, and this is completely random, but I struggled with this for weeks, so I'm just going to share it with you guys right here. Having a VPN program installed on your computer while you are not using a VPN. So what we can do is we can go to Edit, Project Settings, and type in Transport. I totally typed that wrong. So now we have TCP messaging and UDP messaging. We're going to disable enable transport on each of these. And if you have a reason to keep these enabled, the only solution I know of right now is to uninstall that VPN program or to use a VPN through it. So we fixed our stuttering, and hopefully if you've had that problem, you've fixed it too. And now let's get the video back on track. We can change our field of view, our screen percentage, which is actually just on 69% by default, and it's upscaling everything wonderfully. And I'm getting low FPS because I'm recording and running things on cinematic instead of epic or high. And I'm running an AMD RX 6700 XT, by the way. And we have this game view, which will essentially disable all the floating icons or selections in the viewport. Immersive mode, which will scale up the viewport to full screen it, which you can also do just by hitting the F11 button on your keyboard. You can allow camera shakes, bookmarks, which I'll cover in a future video on level editing. We can create a camera for like the sequencer. We can take a high resolution screenshot, choose an editor layout or a viewport layout for such as top, right, and back views, or there's a left view too. Gonna leave that as the one-page layout. And we have advanced settings, which opens up your editor preferences. Now we have our view mode here. We have perspective. There's a view mode for every direction. And if I scroll out with the mouse wheel and right click and hold, we can view our level from different perspectives. We can click on the objects and it will automatically change it to a wireframe view. So now I'm back on perspective, and now we have essentially a bunch of view modes: lit, unlit, wireframe, like detailed lighting, or where you could just inspect your lighting. You can look at only your lighting, your reflections, which look pretty interesting, player collision, visibility collision, path tracing, which is a super interesting mode, and you can use to double check things. And it's not real time, but it's going to be super physically accurate, and you can compare it to your actual scene. So what this is doing is it's doing an offline renderer inside of Unreal Engine. Now, if I just go back to lit, they are extremely close. Lumen and Nanite are really super amazing. And we also have a bunch of different debug modes. We have debug for ray tracing. We have buffer visualization for the different buffers, like normal, specular, base color, roughness, shading model, stuff that you'll become much more familiar with over time as you progress in the engine. And now we have nanite visualization, which if we click, we can see all the nanite related things in our level. And right now we can see this mesh we imported is fully downloaded. It finished up a little while ago. And if we look closely, we can You might think, oh wow, look at these triangles right here. Those aren't triangles, those are clusters. Now these over here are triangles, and nanite really is completely amazing. If I open up this nanite menu here, I can just click to show just the triangles, and we can see the insane amount of detail here in nanite. I can actually hold down C to zoom in and just look at that. Look at all those triangles. It's crazy. It's just, it never ceases to amaze me. And as you zoom out, the triangles get bigger and bigger. Nanite removes the need for level of details. I have a couple of videos on nanite already, which will appear up in the corner of the video for you guys to check out, but there are earlier videos from early access, and once I do newer videos on nanite, they will replace the ones you see in the corner here. Now we can also look at the lumen overview, which is a bit different, a bit softer. I'll cover these. If you want this to be a higher resolution, there are multiple things you can do, but I'll be covering that in another video soon. Again, there's probably just gonna be a massive list of videos linked here. You'll find this video in different playlists. There's so much to cover with Unreal Engine. It's impossible to try to cover it all in one video that's not way too long. Maybe I'll take these videos and combine them together in the future, but right now I'm just recording the first one. So we can also view our shadow masks and things for our virtual shadow maps. But I'm going to go back to lit, and we are going to move on. We have easy access to engine scalability, and now we have some of the things you'll be using most often with the level editor. We have select object. We have a button to choose our different modes. We have a select object mode, which just allows us to select an object. We have a movement mode, which we can click, and it gives us a little gizmo at the origin point of an object, where we can move it up, down, around. If we want to rotate it, we can click on the rotation, rotate it around. If we want to scale it, we can do that too. We can scale it up, make it super tall and stretched out. I can hit Control Z to undo. I can hit Control Y to redo, Control Z again to undo. I can scale it uniformly along all three axes, X, Y, and Z, by clicking and holding that white box there. Control Z to undo that. It looks like I actually let go of it at the perfect place. I can also use W to select the translate mode, E for rotation, and R for scale. Super useful hotkeys. If you're interested in a ton of more shortcuts for level editing and some other things on the engine, again, I have another video on that on the channel. We can toggle between the world grid here, where we can move it relative to the world grid. So like if we rotate it and then try to move it again, it's relative to this world grid. We could also toggle over into a local grid so that if we rotate it, we can move it in line with its rotation. Control Z again a couple of times to undo all that. We can turn off grid snapping, which allows completely freeform movement. But if we need two pieces to snap perfectly together, as long as their origin points are lined up in a way that works, we can choose our unit size. We can enable that by clicking this button and then choose our unit size. We can move in increments of 1 unit, which is a single centimeter. Each Unreal unit is equivalent to a centimeter. 50 units, 100, so on and so forth. You have the same two settings for rotation, but in degrees instead of units. And again for scales, but in increments of scaling rather than units. Finally, we have camera speed, which we have kind of two settings here. We have a top bar for 1 to 8. Default's 4. I can turn that up to 8, and we move around a whole lot faster, but it gets faster. You can actually turn the scale up and like multiply that 8 essentially by 128, and now, well, settings in this project looks like they're, or this default map look like they're causing some issues here, but we can see a planet. So now the real question is, how do we get back down? Well, really, you could just click anything in this new panel here, your outliner, where you have all the objects in your level. You can select each of them and access their details panel, which has all the settings you'll need for that specific object. But keep in mind, these are the settings for the object in the world. It will not change the settings for any other versions of that object. So if you have two meshes through the same mesh, you can click on one in your outliner or in your viewport and change its settings independently from any of the other objects. But if it's like a blueprint and you want to change all of the objects, you need to open up the blueprint editor for that object. This gives me the option to create one because what I selected is a static mesh. But if you wanted to change the settings for that mesh object, you can see this here, the static mesh thing, and we can click to browse to the asset, double click it, and we can open up the window that's essentially an asset viewer inside of the engine. And you can do this for all these different types of assets, like this material. If it's a skeletal mesh, you could open up the skeletal mesh instead of the static mesh, which a skeletal mesh is just a deformable mesh for like a character. And you have all sorts of settings here you can look through. I'd recommend, if you're interested, looking at the documentation, because again, too much to cover in this video. It's already gone on for a really long time. And really, you just have all of your settings here. And these settings change based on the object. At the top here, we have a little overview of the different settings, and we can click to essentially hide everything other than what we're interested in. And so these options might be different, again, for different things in your level, but it's an easy way to navigate through and see what sort of options you have. But again, how do we get back down? Well, we make sure we have something selected and we hit the F key on the keyboard. That's the focus key. It allows you to focus in on a selected object. Another super, super useful hotkey. I'm going to set my camera speed back to the default and navigate out of here. So there we have it. Those are all the elements that we can see right now of the Unreal Engine editor, or at least the main page. But there's actually one more thing. A content drawer. You might have seen me open it up a couple of times, and I'll do it again by pressing the control key and the spacebar key. And this is essentially our content folder structure for our entire project. It contains all of our assets, such as this mesh here. We'll actually see that when we dragged it into the level, it created a new folder called Megascans, a 3D assets folder, and then a folder for this asset specifically with all the assets it needs. The asset itself, its material, its textures, and the preview version of the asset that it brought in before it downloaded the full resolution nanite mesh. We have a search bar where we can search for different assets. I could search for like under blueprint, which is a prefix that's commonly used for blueprints. And we can see the blueprint in the project, our game mode, character, light studio, which is actually new to this template. I don't think that was in the Unreal Engine 4 template. This is the first time I'm seeing that actually. Our animation blueprints, which, again, blueprint scripting system is something I'm going to cover in another video. And you can see your entire file structure from this side menu here. And if you want to see some of the engine content or built-in content, you can go all the way over here to settings, and you can click this show engine content. It looks like I actually had that on already to begin. Yep, because you have this all folder where you have content, which is project specific, then you have engine, which is engine specific. And here's all our sort of built-in content for the engine. It's like how we get our cubes, our basic shapes, that kind of stuff. Control spacebar to open this up again. And let's say you're trying to build out a level, you're dragging out a bunch of static meshes and this closes every time and you have to hit control spacebar over and over and over again. There's a useful button here called dock and layout. You can click it and it turns your content drawer into a content browser window, which you can adjust the size of by clicking and holding on the edge here. And it stays inside of it stays open while you drag and drop assets into the editor, and close out of it to reset to the content drawer. Hey guys, so I actually forgot a couple of things when I originally recorded the video. So I just started recording again, which is why my audio sounds a little bit different, because I've actually already edited most of the video and I just now noticed that there were two things that I missed. So in the content drawer, there's a super important add button, and it lets you add any sort of thing that you can create in the engine to your project: a blueprint class, level, material, Niagara system, animation blueprint, blend space, there's all sorts of stuff here. And I encourage you to look through it to find something that piques your interest, and then to search that up in the documentation. Of course, I'll be covering some of this stuff in future videos, but until then, there's no way I can possibly cover this all in a single video on the main Windows user interface. Now, there's also this button, which I only discovered fairly recently, titled Add Feature or Content Pack. Now, if I click it, it gives me the option to add features or content packs from the other templates into my project. So this is super useful if you create a blank project and realize you want to use something from another template project as a base, or if you just want to look at some of the C++ stuff for a project or blueprint project you might be inside of already. But I'll go ahead and close out of this, and now there's one more thing. If I open up the content drawer again, there's this import button. Now if I click it, it opens up the content folder of the project and its directory inside of my computer's file browser, and from here I can browse away from it to whatever other files I'd want to import. These could be files for 3D models, images, for textures, sound files, video files, anything that would exist outside of the engine that you need to bring into it. I'm not going to cover the import process for these different types of files in this video. I'd like to make a separate video on importing things into the engine, just because there are a lot of different settings and I'd like to go through them, and it really all deserves its own video. Anyway, those are the two things I somehow managed to forget when I was originally recording the video, and so let's get back to that now. We can also click this output log too, and that'll open an output log which you can use for debugging and other things. And finally, we have this little command option which allows us to run console commands inside of the engine. And if for some reason you ever need to run a console command in the game, you just hit the tilde key and type in your command. For example, one of those commands is stat FPS, and it'll show your frames per second over in the corner of your screen. It's super useful if you've built your project and you haven't implemented an FPS counter, or if you're playing in an editor window, or if you're playing in a standalone game and you want to see your frames. There's a bunch of other debug things too. You can find a list of these sorts of things on the documentation. And really, that is pretty much the whole main window of the Unreal Engine editor. Now, of course, I could navigate into content, third person, blueprints, and open up the script with the blueprint visual scripting system for this character with its nodes for handling input. There is a whole lot more the engine has to offer, but this video has gone on for a little while. I think hopefully you'll have a bit of a better feel for Unreal Engine, and soon there will be more videos up on the channel covering these different windows: the blueprint editor, some things about level creation, creating worlds, using world partition. There's a lot of videos I plan on making, and chances are you are in a playlist for one of them, watching this video as your first introduction to the engine. Now, if you did choose this video as your first introduction to the engine, I just want to say thank you. I'm so glad you stuck all the way through. I hope you really learned some new things from the video, and I will see you hopefully in the next one. And if you enjoyed, if you stuck around, please consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video. It really, really does help. And there's also a link to an Outcast Dev School Discord server down below. Right now we have over 400 members. We just did a little watch party for the Unreal Engine 5 State of Unreal release stream, where we talked about stuff and watched as it was happening. It was super fun. And if you want to see when those things happen, just chat with me back and forth in Discord, join the server. I'm happy to talk to you, answer your questions, and just really hang out. Again, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you all in the next video.